You have 30 days to vacate, old man. This property is no longer yours. The sheriff's deputy handed me the eviction notice like he was delivering death sentence papers. My hands shook as I read the legal jargon. 47 years I'd called this place home. 47 years of memories, sweat, and dreams. But here's what the deputy didn't know. What nobody in that courtroom would expect. I'm Robert Tank Morrison, and I don't give up without a fight. The notice felt heavy in my weathered hands, heavier than the rifle I carried in Vietnam, heavier than the casket I helped lower when my Martha passed 5 years ago. Sir, you need to acknowledge receipt, the deputy said, tapping his clipboard. I looked up at him. Young kid, maybe 25, probably never fought for anything in his life. Son, do you know what this land means to me? He shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I just serve papers. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. If I had $1 for every time someone said that while stabbing me in the back. The deputy climbed into his patrol car and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway. The same driveway where Martha and I had our first dance as newlyweds, where we taught our daughter Jessica to ride her bike, where I'd buried 3 dogs and planted an oak tree for each one. Now, some corporate vultures wanted to tear it all down for a shopping mall. I crumpled the notice and threw it as hard as I could. It landed pathetically near my mailbox, mocking me with its official seal. That's when I heard the voice behind me. Rough day, neighbor? I turned to see Patricia Wells from next door. Sweet woman, but she had the worst timing. They're trying to steal my home, Pat. She nodded sympathetically. I heard about the lawsuit. David versus Goliath, huh? David versus Goliath. She had no idea how right she was. I picked up the crumpled paper and smoothed it out. Meridian Development Corporation. I'd never heard of them before they filed their claim 6 months ago. According to their lawyers, they had documentation proving my deed was fraudulent. 47 years of property taxes. 47 years of maintenance, improvements, and love poured into every square inch. And some lawyer with a briefcase was telling me it was all fake. Tank, you need to fight this, Patricia said. Get yourself a good attorney. I laughed bitterly. With what money? You know what lawyers cost these days? Martha's medical bills had cleaned out our savings. The funeral expenses took the rest. My veteran's pension barely covered groceries and utilities. But there was something else. Something I hadn't told Patricia. Something I hadn't told anyone. The documents they claimed were fraudulent? I knew exactly where they came from. And I knew exactly why someone wanted this particular piece of land so badly. It had nothing to do with shopping malls. I walked back to my front porch, Patricia following close behind. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. I'd been meaning to fix them for months. But what was the point now? You know what the worst part is? I said, settling into my old rocking chair. They think I'm just some helpless old man who'll roll over and play dead. Patricia sat down on the porch rail. Aren't you going to try to fight it? I looked out at my property. 3 acres of the most beautiful land in Tennessee. Rolling hills, mature trees, and a creek that ran crystal clear year-round. Martha used to say it was our little slice of heaven. Pat, let me ask you something. What would you do if someone tried to steal the most important thing in your life? She thought for a moment. I'd fight back with everything I had. Even if everyone told you that you couldn't win? Especially then. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Patricia didn't know about my past. She didn't know about the things I'd seen, the battles I'd fought, or the promises I'd made to men who never came home. She didn't know that I'd spent 3 tours in Vietnam as a combat engineer, that I'd built bridges under enemy fire and demolished bunkers with my bare hands, that I'd earned a Silver Star for actions I still couldn't talk about. Most importantly, she didn't know about the secret I'd been keeping for 47 years. The real reason I'd bought this land. The real reason Meridian Development wanted it so badly. Tank, what are you thinking about? I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was the same view I'd shared with Martha on our wedding night. The same view I'd promised her we'd grow old watching together. I'm thinking about a promise I made a long time ago. Patricia looked confused. What kind of promise? I turned back to her, and she must have seen something in my eyes that made her sit up straighter. The kind you keep, no matter what it costs you. The next morning, I drove into town to the courthouse. Time to file my response to their lawsuit. Time to show Meridian Development that this old man wasn't going down without a fight. But as I walked up the courthouse steps, I had no idea what I was really walking into. I had no idea that within a week, this simple property dispute would explode into something that would shake this entire county to its core. And I definitely had no idea that when the judge finally learned the truth about my past, about this land, and about the promise I'd made 47 years ago, it would leave him speechless. But that's exactly what happened. The courthouse smelled like old books and broken dreams. I'd been here before. Traffic tickets, property tax appeals, the usual small-town business. But today felt different. Today, I was fighting for my life. The clerk behind the counter looked bored until she saw the determination in my eyes. "I need to file a response to a lawsuit," I said, sliding the papers across the marble counter. She glanced at the documents. "Meridian Development versus Robert Morrison. You're representing yourself? Can't afford a lawyer." She gave me a sympathetic look. "Mr. Morrison, this is a complex property dispute. Are you sure you don't want legal representation?" I leaned forward. "Lady, I've been fighting my whole life. I think I can handle a few corporate bullies." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already done my homework. 3 weeks of digging through public records, old newspapers, and dusty filing cabinets. What I'd found made my blood run cold. Meridian Development Corporation was a shell company, founded 18 months ago. No previous projects, no local employees, just a P.O. box in Nashville and a fancy website. But the real shocker came when I traced the ownership. The company was controlled by a man named Vincent Caldwell, and Vincent Caldwell had a very interesting connection to my little piece of Tennessee heaven. "Mr. Morrison, you have 30 days to file your response," the clerk said, stamping my papers. I nodded and walked toward the exit. That's when I heard my name called from across the lobby. "Tank Morrison, is that really you?" I turned to see a face I hadn't seen in 20 years. Judge William Hayes, looking older and grayer, but still carrying himself with the same authority I remembered from his days as a young prosecutor. "Bill Hayes, I heard you made judge." He walked over and shook my hand firmly. "Been on the bench for 15 years now. What brings you to my courthouse?" I showed him the lawsuit papers. His expression grew serious as he read. "Tank, I can't discuss the case with you directly, but I will say this. Be very careful who you're dealing with." "What do you mean?" Judge Hayes looked around the lobby, then leaned closer. "Meridian Development has filed 3 similar lawsuits in the past year, all against elderly property owners, all claiming fraudulent deeds." My heart started pounding. Did they win? 2 out of 3. The families lost everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about my property. This was some kind of systematic land grab. "Bill, there's something else. Something I need to tell you, but not here." He checked his watch. "I'm done for the day in an hour. Meet me at Murphy's Diner. We'll talk." An hour later, I sat across from Judge Hayes in a corner booth at Murphy's. The old diner was nearly empty, just the way I needed it. "Bill, what I'm about to tell you, I've never told anyone, not even Martha." He leaned forward, his judge's instincts kicking in. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "You know I served 3 tours in Vietnam. What you don't know is why I bought that specific piece of land when I came home. I always wondered about that. It's pretty remote, even for Tennessee. In 1978, I was part of a classified military operation. We were tasked with relocating certain sensitive materials from a decommissioned research facility." Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. "What kind of materials?" "The kind that could level a city block if they fell into the wrong hands." The words hung in the air between us. I could see the judge processing the implications. "Tank, are you telling me there are still government materials buried on your property?" "I'm telling you that 47 years ago, I made a promise to my country, and to the 5 men who died protecting that secret." Judge Hayes sat back in his chair. "Good God, does anyone else know?" "Someone does. Someone who's been waiting decades for the right moment to make a move." I pulled out a manila folder I'd been carrying. Inside were photocopies of old military documents, classified reports, and a list of names. Vincent Caldwell's real name is Vincent Kozlov. His grandfather was a Soviet intelligence officer who disappeared in 1978, right around the time of our operation. The judge's face went pale. You think this is about espionage? I think this is about revenge, and I think Vincent Kozlov has been planning this for a very long time. Judge Hayes studied the documents. Tank, if what you're saying is true, this is way bigger than a property dispute. This is a national security issue. It gets worse. I contacted the Department of Defense last week. The officer I spoke with told me that several classified sites across the country have been targeted by shell companies in the past 2 years. All property disputes? All property disputes. All elderly veterans. All cases that were settled quietly out of court. Judge Hayes closed the folder and looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. Tank, why didn't you call the FBI? I laughed bitterly. And tell them what? That a 73-year-old veteran thinks he's being targeted by foreign agents? They'd lock me up in a psych ward. But you have proof. I have theories and suspicions. What I need is evidence. Real evidence that will hold up in court. Judge Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward again. Tank, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Shoot. Is there actually anything buried on your property? I met his eyes without flinching. Bill, there are some secrets that die with the men who keep them. He nodded slowly. I understand. But Tank, if you're right about this, if Vincent Kozlov is really after classified materials, then you're in serious danger. I know. So what's your plan? I smiled grimly. I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to fight. Against professional operatives? Tank, you're one man. I'm one man who knows this land better than anyone alive. One man who's been preparing for this fight for 47 years. Judge Hayes shook his head. This is insane. Maybe. But it's my fight, and I'm not backing down. We sat in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing the magnitude of what I'd just revealed. Finally, Judge Hayes spoke. Tank, I can't help you directly, but I can tell you this. When your case comes before my court, I'll make sure you get a fair hearing. That's all I ask. As we prepared to leave, Judge Hayes grabbed my arm. Tank, be careful. If you're right about Vincent Kozlov, he's not going to play by the rules. I stood up and put on my jacket. Bill, the men I served with in Vietnam didn't die so I could roll over and quit when things got tough. I know, but they also didn't die so you could get yourself killed over a piece of land. I looked him straight in the eye. It's not just a piece of land. It's a promise. As I walked out of Murphy's Diner that night, I had no idea that Vincent Kozlov was already making his next move. I had no idea that by morning, everything would change. And I definitely had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. The flames were already 20 feet high when I got home. My barn, the one I'd built with my own hands in 1979, the one where I'd stored 40 years of memories, reduced to a roaring inferno in the Tennessee night. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of my truck. The heat hit me like a wall, even from 50 yards away. Tank! Patricia Wells came running from her house in her nightgown. I called the fire department. They're on their way. I stood there watching everything burn. My tools, Martha's antiques that I'd stored after she passed, photo albums, furniture, keepsakes from my military service. But that's not what made my blood boil. Spray painted on the side of my house, in red letters 3 feet tall, was a message. Last warning. The fire department arrived 20 minutes later. By then, there wasn't much left to save. Chief Danny Rodriguez, a good man I'd known since he was a kid, walked over with his helmet under his arm. Tank, I'm sorry. By the time we got the call, it was too far gone. I nodded, still staring at the smoldering ruins. Danny, this wasn't an accident. What makes you say that? I pointed to the graffiti on my house. Accelerant? We'll investigate, but yeah. Gasoline, probably. Maybe diesel. Patricia appeared at my elbow. Tank, you can't stay here tonight. Come over to my place. I'm not going anywhere. But what if they come back? I looked at her, then at Chief Rodriguez. Then they'll get more than they bargained for. Danny frowned. Tank, If you know who did this, you need to tell me. I have suspicions, but no proof. This is serious. Arson is a felony. And if they're threatening you, I can take care of myself, Danny. He shook his head. Tank, you're 73 years old. Whatever fight you think you're in, maybe it's time to walk away. Walk away. Everyone kept telling me to walk away. Danny, did your grandfather ever tell you about the promise he made to your grandmother? About how he'd never let anyone hurt his family? Chief Rodriguez looked confused. Yeah, but what does that have to do with... Some promises you keep no matter what. After the fire department left, I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee and my old hunting rifle across my lap. The smell of smoke still hung in the air like a bad memory. That's when the black SUV pulled into my driveway. 2 men got out. Expensive suits, city shoes, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. The older one approached first. Tall, silver-haired, with eyes like a shark. I knew immediately who he was. Mr. Morrison, I'm Vincent Caldwell. I believe we need to talk. I didn't stand up, didn't offer to shake hands. Just kept my rifle where he could see it. Nice barn you had there, he continued, glancing at the smoking ruins. You here to gloat? I'm here to make you an offer. The second man stayed by the SUV. Younger, built like a linebacker, and definitely armed. These weren't lawyers. These were the kind of men who made problems disappear. I'm listening, I said. Vincent smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Drop your lawsuit. Sign over the deed. I'll pay you 3 times what this property is worth. And if I don't? Then accidents keep happening. Maybe next time it won't be just a barn. I set down my coffee cup and stood up slowly. The rifle stayed in my hands. Son, let me tell you something about threats. I've been threatened by experts. North Vietnamese regulars who could put a bullet through your eye at 300 yards. You know what I did to them? Vincent's smile faded slightly. I survived. They didn't. The younger man took a step forward, but Vincent waved him back. Mr. Morrison, you're living in the past. This isn't Vietnam. This is business. You're right. In Vietnam, at least I knew who my enemies were. Vincent reached into his jacket. I raised the rifle an inch. He froze, then slowly pulled out a manila envelope. Final offer, $500,000 cash. You can retire somewhere nice. Florida, maybe. And all I have to do is forget about the promise I made. What promise? I stared at him for a long moment. The promise I made to your grandfather. The change in Vincent's expression was immediate. The cold businessman mask slipped, revealing something much more dangerous underneath. What did you say? You heard me, Kozlov. The second man's hand moved toward his jacket. I swung the rifle in his direction. I wouldn't. Vincent held up a hand to stop his associate. How long have you known? Long enough. Question is, how long have you been planning this? 30 years. Ever since I learned what really happened to my grandfather. Your grandfather was a spy and a killer. He got what he deserved. Vincent's face went red. He was a patriot. He was trying to prevent a catastrophe. He was trying to steal classified weapons technology. Big difference. You have no idea what's buried on this land, do you? I kept the rifle trained on his partner. I know enough. Do you know about the uranium? Do you know about the plutonium cores? Do you know that what's buried here could power a small city or level 10 city blocks? My blood went cold. Uranium. Plutonium. The documents I'd been given back in 1978 had been heavily redacted. I'd never known the full scope of what we'd buried. Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. Doesn't it? How many people live in this county, Mr. Morrison? 50,000? 100,000? I saw where he was going with this. You're bluffing. Am I? What happens when word gets out that there's weapons, grade nuclear material buried in someone's backyard? What happens when the media finds out? When the protesters arrive? When the federal government decides to condemn the entire area? He was right, and we both knew it. If the truth came out, it would destroy this entire community. So what's your real game here, Kozlov? My game is simple. I extract what my grandfather died trying to obtain. I sell it to people who will pay handsomely for it. and nobody gets hurt. Nobody except the people who get killed by whatever weapons your buyers build. Vincent shrugged. Not my problem. I'd heard enough. Get off my property. Mr. Morrison, you're making a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. This isn't one of them. Vincent nodded to his partner and they started walking back to the SUV. But before getting in, he turned back to me. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, I stopped playing nice. I stopped playing nice 47 years ago. They drove away, leaving me alone with the smell of smoke and the weight of what I'd just learned. Uranium, plutonium, weapons-grade nuclear material. I'd spent 47 years guarding something I didn't fully understand. Now I knew why 5 good men had died protecting this secret, and I knew why Vincent Kozlov was willing to kill to get it. As I sat back down on my porch, one thought kept running through my mind. 48 hours. In 48 hours, this would either be over, or it would get a lot worse. I had no idea just how much worse it could get. You have 30 days to vacate, old man. This property is no longer yours. The sheriff's deputy handed me the eviction notice like he was delivering death sentence papers. My hands shook as I read the legal jargon. 47 years I'd called this place home. 47 years of memories, sweat, and dreams. But here's what the deputy didn't know. What nobody in that courtroom would expect. I'm Robert Tank Morrison. And I don't give up without a fight. The notice felt heavy in my weathered hands. Heavier than the rifle I carried in Vietnam. Heavier than the casket I helped lower when my Martha passed 5 years ago. Sir, you need to acknowledge receipt, the deputy said, tapping his clipboard. I looked up at him. Young kid. Maybe 25. Probably never fought for anything in his life. Your Honor, this man is a fraud and a terrorist. Vincent Kozlov stood in Judge Hayes' courtroom wearing a perfectly pressed suit and the kind of confidence that comes from buying judges in third-world countries. Too bad for him, this wasn't that kind of court. I sat at the defendant's table with Agent Turner beside me. The metal case rested between us like a ticking bomb, which, in a way, it was. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Hayes said, those are serious accusations. Do you have evidence to support them? Vincent's lawyer, a slick character named Bradford Pike, stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Morrison engaged in armed combat with federal agents last night. He used military-grade weapons against law enforcement. Those weren't federal agents, I said, standing up. They were mercenaries hired by this man to steal classified government property. The courtroom erupted. Vincent's face went red, but he kept his composure. The man was a professional, I'd give him that. Judge Hayes banged his gavel. Order! Mr. Morrison, you'll have your chance to speak. Agent Turner leaned over and whispered, Are you ready? I nodded. 47 years of secrets were about to come out. Martha would have been terrified. But Martha never knew what kind of man she'd married. Your Honor, I said, I request permission to present classified evidence that will show this court the true nature of this case. Judge Hayes frowned. Classified evidence? Agent Turner stood up. Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Rebecca Turner, FBI. Mr. Morrison is under federal protection as a witness in a national security investigation. Vincent's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection! This is a civil property dispute, not a spy novel. Overruled, Judge Hayes said. His eyes were sharp. He remembered our conversation at Murphy's Diner. Agent Turner, proceed. She opened the metal case and pulled out a manila folder. Your Honor, in 1978, the United States military conducted Operation Silent Thunder. The purpose was to relocate classified nuclear materials from a decommissioned research facility. The courtroom went dead silent. Mr. Morrison was part of the team tasked with securing these materials. 5 soldiers died protecting this operation. Mr. Morrison was the sole survivor. Vincent was gripping his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Agent Turner continued. The materials were buried on Mr. Morrison's property and placed under his protection. He has maintained this trust for 47 years. Judge Hayes leaned forward. What kind of materials? Weapons. Grade uranium and plutonium. Enough to build multiple nuclear devices. You could have heard a pin drop. Vincent's lawyer looked like he was going to be sick. Furthermore, Agent Turner said, Vincent Caldwell is actually Vincent Kozlov, grandson of Soviet agent Dmitry Kozlov, who was killed attempting to steal these same materials in 1978. The courtroom exploded again. Judge Hayes had to bang his gavel 5 times to restore order. Vincent stood up slowly. The mask of civility was finally slipping. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. I'm an American businessman. I have documentation." "Forged documentation," Agent Turner interrupted. She pulled out another folder. "Birth certificate, social security number, passport, all fake. Created by professional identity thieves." I stood up. "Your Honor, may I tell this court what really happened in 1978? Judge Hayes nodded. "The floor is yours, Mr. Morrison." I walked to the center of the courtroom. Every eye was on me, including Vincent's. His stare could have melted steel. The 15th of October, 1978. 300 hours. My team was moving nuclear materials from a research facility outside Nashville to a secure burial site. We'd been told it was routine. Transport and bury. No complications expected. I paused, remembering. We were wrong. At 347 hours, we were ambushed by 6 men in military gear. Professional soldiers. They knew exactly what we were carrying and exactly where we'd be. Vincent was leaning forward now, hanging on every word. The firefight lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, 5 of my men were dead. The 6th man, their leader, was wounded but alive. I turned and looked directly at Vincent. His name was Dmitry Kozlov. Vincent's hands were shaking with rage. Before he died, Kozlov told me something. He said his family would never stop looking for what we'd buried. He said his son would continue the mission, and if his son failed, his grandson would finish it. The courtroom was dead silent. "Your Honor, this isn't about property rights. This is about a 47-year-old promise. A promise I made to 5 dead soldiers and to my country." Judge Hayes was staring at me with something close to awe. "Mr. Morrison, why didn't you report this threat years ago?" "Because I didn't know Vincent Kozlov had a grandson. I didn't know he'd grown up, changed his name, and spent 30 years planning this operation." I pulled out a photograph from the metal case. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough. "This is Dmitry Kozlov, taken after his capture in 1978. I held up another photo, a recent surveillance shot of Vincent. Same eyes, same nose, same scar on the left cheek. Vincent exploded. "You killed my grandfather! You murdered him in cold blood!" "Your grandfather was a spy and a traitor. He got what spies get." Vincent lunged toward me, but 2 FBI agents grabbed him before he could take 3 steps. "You have no idea what you're protecting," he screamed. "That material could power cities, could revolutionize energy production, and you're keeping it buried like some paranoid old fool. Or it could build bombs that kill millions of people." Vincent stopped struggling. For just a moment, the rage left his eyes, and I saw something else, something that almost looked like pain. "My grandfather wasn't evil," he said quietly. "He was trying to prevent a war." By stealing nuclear weapons? By ensuring no one country had a monopoly on power. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a tiny bit of sympathy for Vincent Kozlov. He'd grown up believing his grandfather was a hero. He'd spent his whole life trying to complete what he thought was a noble mission. He was wrong, but I understood. "Vincent," I said, "your grandfather made his choice. You've made yours. The difference is, you still have time to make a different one." Judge Hayes cleared his throat. "Mr. Kozlov, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft of government property. Agent Turner, please, take him into custody." As the FBI agents led Vincent away, he turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over, Morrison." Yes, it is. But even as I said it, I knew he was right. This wasn't over. Because there was still the matter of what to do with 47 years' worth of buried secrets. And that decision was about to tear my life apart all over again. "Mr. Morrison, the United States government wants to buy your land." 3 weeks after Vincent Kozlov's arrest, I sat in a conference room in Nashville facing 5 people in expensive suits. Department of Defense, Department of Energy, A general whose chest was covered in ribbons I recognized, and Agent Turner, who'd become something like a friend. "How much?" I asked. The DoD representative, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, slid a document across the table. $10 million, plus full relocation assistance, plus a government pension that will take care of you for life. $10 million, more money than I'd ever dreamed of. And in return, we excavate the materials, transport them to a secure facility, and your 47-year watch ends. I stared at the contract. My signature on that line would solve every problem I had. New house, financial security, an end to the nightmares that had haunted me since 1978. "There's just one condition, Doctor," Chen added. "What's that?" "You can never speak about Operation Silent Thunder, ever, to anyone." I looked around the table. "What about the men who died? What about their families?" The general leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, those men died heroes, but their sacrifice must remain classified. Forever, forever." I set down the pen. "Can I have a minute to think?" Agent Turner nodded. "Take all the time you need." I walked to the window and looked out at the Nashville skyline. Somewhere out there, Vincent Kozlov was sitting in a federal prison cell, probably planning his next move. Men like him never gave up. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was the thought of Jimmy Rodriguez from Chicago, 22 years old, never made it home from Vietnam. His mother still sent me Christmas cards. What bothered me was Danny McCoy from Alabama. Wanted to be a teacher. Took 3 bullets in the chest protecting those materials. What bothered me was the promise I'd made. Not to the government. To them. I walked back to the table. "I need to ask you something." "What happens if I say no?" Dr. Chen looked surprised. "Sir, what happens if I don't sell? What happens if I keep the land?" The general frowned. "Mr. Morrison, you'd be placing yourself in permanent danger. There are other people out there who know about this site. Vincent Kozlov had associates." "I know. You'd be alone. No protection. No backup." "I've been alone for 47 years. Agent Turner leaned forward. "Tank, why would you want to keep this burden?" I thought about how to explain it. How do you tell someone about the weight of a promise? How do you describe the responsibility that comes with being the last man standing? Because someone has to stand guard. The room went quiet. "Those materials aren't just dangerous," I continued. "They're a responsibility. A trust. 5 men died to protect that trust." Dr. Chen shook her head. "Mr. Morrison, you're 73 years old. You can't guard nuclear materials forever." "Maybe not. But I can guard them today. And tomorrow. And for as long as I'm able." I stood up and walked toward the door. "Tank, wait." Agent Turner followed me into the hallway. "Are you sure about this? Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you have kids?" She nodded. 2 daughters. What kind of world do you want to leave them? A safe one. So do I. And sometimes keeping the world safe means one old soldier keeps standing guard." She smiled sadly. "Even if it costs you everything?" "Especially then." 2 hours later, I was back on my property. The insurance company had cut me a check for the barn. The contractors had fixed my windows and doors. From a distance, you'd never know there'd been a war fought here. But I knew. Patricia Wells came over with a casserole and a worried expression. "Tank, I heard rumors about federal agents and classified this and classified that." I took the casserole and invited her to sit on my porch, the same porch where this whole thing started. "Pat, what would you say if I told you I was planning to stick around for a while?" "I'd say it's about time. This place isn't the same without you." "Even if it means danger? Even if there might be more trouble?" She looked at me with a kind of steady gaze that reminded me why I'd always liked her. "Tank, some things are worth fighting for, and some people are worth standing with." That evening, I sat in my rocking chair watching the sunset over the hills. The same view I'd shared with Martha, the same view I'd promised to protect. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "The old man chose poorly. Others will come. Others will finish what I started." Vincent Kozlov. Even from prison, he wasn't giving up. I typed back, Let them come. The response was immediate. They will. And next time, you won't see them coming. I set down the phone and picked up my rifle. Tomorrow, I'd call Agent Turner. Tomorrow, I'd set up better security. Tomorrow, I'd start preparing for the next fight. But tonight, I had something more important to do. I walked to the back of my property, to a small grove of oak trees I'd planted years ago. 5 trees. One for each man who died in 1978. Jimmy, Danny, Rodriguez, Williams, Parker. I said their names aloud, the way I did every year on the 15th of October. I kept the promise, boys. I'm still keeping it. The wind rustled through the leaves, and for just a moment, I could swear I heard voices. Familiar voices, telling me they were proud, telling me to keep fighting. As I walked back to the house, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning of the next chapter. Because there's something Vincent Kozlov and his associates didn't understand. Something the government officials didn't understand. Something even I hadn't fully understood until tonight. This was never about the land. It was never about the money. It was never even about the nuclear materials. This was about the promise. And promises, real promises, don't have expiration dates. They last as long as there's someone left to keep them. I'm Robert Tank Morrison. I'm 73 years old. I'm the last guardian of Operation Silent Thunder, and I'm not going anywhere. Let them come. I'll be waiting. The way I've been waiting for 47 years. The way I'll keep waiting for as long as I draw breath. Because that's what soldiers do. We keep our promises, no matter what it costs.